aspect of God, and that this wall, though it was created by the Romans, it represents the feminine nature of God. And so these Israelis are literally having sex with it to try to activate its feminine divine energy. Is this correct?
So, look, I'm not an expert. I'm not a rabbi, right? So I can't tell you, but let me speculate about how this works, okay? So the Kabbalah says this. The Kabbalah says is that God is the will to bestow. Okay, that's what God is. God is all love, all generosity, all compassion, and God wants to uh, bestow. But if you want to bestow, you need something to receive, right? So God, what God does in order to bestow is create the will to receive, which is the first man, Adam Kadmon. Okay. But the problem with the will to receive is that if you're all receiving, you don't understand what bestowing means, right? So let me use a allegory. So let's just say I invite you to my house, and I'm really excited to meet you and share a meal with you. So I spent the whole weekend cooking the most sumptuous meal ever. It's a 10-course banquet, and I'm really excited to have you enjoy this meal. And it's the will to bestow, right? I just want to be open and generous with you. But you come to my house and you look at this sumptuous meal and you are embarrassed by it. You're confused by it. You're like, oh my God, does he want to borrow money from me? Like what's going on here? And like you're embarrassed by it. So like you're like, oh my God, my mom is calling me. So you run away. Okay. So so now I'm like, okay, how to get single back in so we can share a meal. Okay. So for the Kabbalists, that is the struggle of life, where God is the will to bestow, humanity is the will to receive, but we refuse to receive God's gift. So what this means is that we humans need to engage in a long process of spiritual alchemy to reduce our ego and to appreciate the generosity of God for a process of redemption and repentance, okay? But you can also frame it as the generative principle, which is God, and the productive principle, which is us, okay? And when you marry the two, then you have perfection. You can also see it as the dynamic of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, okay? But the goal of life is a reunion with God, right? And that's why you have to build a third temple, because the third temple allows for God to manifest itself on the world so that we can be reunited with God. So it's not really about sex, it's more about reunion, because we're not separate. We just imagine we're separate, and that's the root of all issues,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's what's going on, where the Jewish people, the religious people are like, like how do we reunite with God? And this action in the Wailing Wall, I mean, like it's not really about sex; it's about coming together again, which is sex basically.
Okay. Okay. So maybe there's something to that theory. Now Netanyahu is bragging about something that you spelled out in your lectures, which is that Greater Israel, which was a conspiracy theory not too long ago, you were called anti-Semitic, is something that he seems like he's bragging about publicly in speeches, and that the Lebanon invasion is something that's going to spread and continue out throughout the Middle East. Can we expect this to happen in the near future? And how much of this blame is going to be placed on Netanyahu? Because I saw Tucker Carlson publish the BB Files documentary. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but a lot of the information in there was unimportant from my perspective. I think there were about 10 minutes that were important. In the BB Files, towards the end, they were spelling out how Netanyahu has a signed document that shows that he was the one directing the transactions from Qatar to Hamas. So essentially, he was funding both sides. This is something that you spell in your lectures, how both sides of a war are funded by the same people so that they can direct chaos and outrage and also profit off of it the most. Netanyahu essentially wanted Hamas to be causing chaos so that Gaza would eventually be destroyed. The hostages were not a main concern of his because he wanted to use the Hannibal Directive. He wanted to destroy it completely, which we now see this is happening. And I've seen a lot of Zionists try to say, oh, it's not all Israelis, it's just Netanyahu. It's not, don't be anti-Semitic, it's the Israeli government and it's specific people. The majority of Israelis hate Netanyahu, they protest him, they think he's a bad person. Ben-Gvir was called a terrorist, he's the bad one, not all of us. What is the validity of that theory? And when can we see greater Israel?
Right. So first of all, there's been a long relationship between Hamas and Netanyahu, right? So 1996, I believe it was 1996, okay, but I mean you can fact check me. He was running for the first time to be prime minister. He was
Mhm.
way behind the polls. And then Hamas launched a series of bus attacks in Israel.
Oh, hold on, the audio cut out.
And
There
that
we go.
allowed minister.
Yeah, we're better
Okay.
now.
And then remember, right before October 7th, Netanyahu was fighting for his political life. He was charged with corruption. He is corrupt. His entire family is corrupt. And there were these special investigations of Netanyahu, and there were millions of people protesting in the streets because Netanyahu wanted to change the judiciary. Um, and it seemed as though Netanyahu was dead politically. And then October 7th happened, and now he's still in power. So I think Hamas and Netanyahu work very well together. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And yeah, I mean, like we know for a fact that Qatar is funding Hamas because Netanyahu has instructed them to do so.
Mhm.
Um, the Greater Israel Project, Jewish supremacy, is something that they talk about openly in Israel. I mean, just go to Israel and spend time with Jews, and they'll talk about it openly. And the reason why is that in the Jewish tradition, it doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks. Who cares? What matters is their relationship with God. Okay, that's the only thing that matters. So as long as they're able to move towards reunion with God, move towards redemption of the Jewish people, that's the only thing that matters. And for this redemption to happen, you need to play out history. That requires the fulfillment of the Greater Israel Project and the building of the third temple,
Mhm.
right? So the idea that this is Netanyahu is absurd. 80% of people support this war. 80% of Israelis support this war against Iran. And this Greater Israel Project is clearly the end goal. And this war in Iran is just a way to achieve this. Because think about what's happening in this war, where eventually the entire world's going to be drawn in. The GCC, Dubai, UAE, Saudi Arabia want this war to continue and want to fight Iran to the finish. And Iran can easily destroy the GCC, right? But once the GCC is destroyed, that clears a path for Israel. Turkey might be drawn into this war as well. And if Turkey is drawn into this war, then Iran can destroy it pretty easily. And then that's another domino that falls.
Mhm.
So this war ends, I think, when the United States is forced to retreat from the Middle East, then Israel can achieve the Greater Israel Project.
The UAE, I've seen some reports, I'm not sure how valid they are, that they are going to join Israel and fight Iran. A lot of people in the GCC, especially the Dubai influencers, they thought that this war was going to be over. They were saying it was going to be over in 24 hours. They were saying everybody's panicking. This outrage is unnecessary. What can we see now over a month into this war? You said that the GCC would never have the same reputation again. Is it really over for these people in the Gulf states?
I think it's completely over. I think there's no hope. And I think like they're desperate. And that's why they want to end this war. You know, really strange, but like last week I got an email from the Dubai government inviting me to speak at a conference in September. I'm like, why would I go, man? Are you guys gonna be around in September? And but yeah, no, I think it's done. I think these things are mirages. I think they were artificial creations. I mean, the idea, I mean, like these are basically slave societies, right? Where you have the Emiratis doing nothing, they're on welfare, and then 90% of people do the work, but they're all expatriates. It's a caste system where expatriates are given like these very lavish salaries, and then people from the third world, mainly Pakistan, India, Africa, are treated as slaves in that society.
Yeah, I'm seeing the footage now. It's also, Bengalis are out there. They're finally able to go on the beach. And so you can see them, although these workers flooding through.
Yeah.
Actually, a mirage is the perfect analogy for it. A mirage is the idea of this fantasy land created in the middle of the desert. That's essentially what you could describe it as. I don't want to get banned by the UAE for insinuating that. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to, but they are very strict about that. What about I don't want to hold you up too much of your time, but with the professor conversation coming up from Mehdi Hassan, I think a lot of people are making the comparison between you and Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure if he's still on Daily Wire. Have you compared yourself, well, your careers to him? And what lessons can we learn? Because his reputation is not the same as it once was. He was very popular during the woke push from Larry Fink, as he's now admitted. But nowadays, he has a mental health problem, which, I mean, you did admit that it was getting difficult for you in March. How can we learn from Jordan Peterson's career?
I think that Jordan Peterson is a brilliant teacher, right? If you just go back and watch his UFT lectures, he had a way of engaging his students. He had a way of showing himself that made him very charismatic, that made him an exemplar role model for young people. And if he just focused on that, I think he could have been a positive force in the world. But his mistake was this. His mistake was when he became popular, he monetized himself. So I think there's this clip of him talking about how much money he makes. And he's like, well, I make, $60,000. I'm just making this up, okay? But I'm saying I make $60,000 a week doing lectures. I make $20,000 a week doing book sales. I make $30,000 a week on Patreon. And like I know it's a lot of money and it's very tempting, but when you get seduced by that money, you have to sell your soul, I think. I think, yeah, you want to monetize to a certain extent, and I do monetize. I mean, like I don't monetize my YouTube, but I monetize my Substack, and that's a lot of money. It's nowhere near how much Jordan Peterson makes. I think the Daily Wire gave him $60 million for his IP, right? So that's a lot of money. But you have to remember that this is how they control you. This is how they get you with money, right? So remember, after October 7th, Netanyahu said, give them hell, Israel, right? So he came out vocally in support of Israel. And you shouldn't do that. I mean, you as a teacher, you want to maintain some impartiality. You want to maintain some distance. You want to maintain perspective. But he was taking so much money from these people that he felt that, okay, they're my friends, they're in trouble, I need to speak out. And then he got a lot of backlash for that. But that's how they get you. They get you through money, okay? So I don't monetize my YouTube. And everyone's like, you're insane. You could be generating a lot of money through YouTube and you do a great job on YouTube. So why not just take the cash and enjoy your life? And the answer is because I don't want them to control me, right? So it's a signaling mechanism where, like, I'm telling them I don't want to monetize my YouTube, so don't come talk to me. I'm gonna shut the door on you. The devil can only come in if you let him in. Okay, you have to invite the devil in, and I'm not gonna invite you guys in, so don't bother. Right? I don't care what you do to me, but I'm not gonna take your money. I'm not gonna make a deal with you. You're not gonna and like because what I care about is my soul. What I cares about is being a teacher, and I think that's a mistake that Jordan Peterson made. And like quite honestly, once you make this mistake, you're stuck, man. You are now bought. And if you want to change the terms of the contract, if you want to be like, I'm sorry, this was not a good deal, I'll give back all your money. Well, certain things can happen to you.
That was my favorite statement from the first interview we did, was that the real wealth is knowledge. Real wealth is not something, not Rothschild goy bucks, as I like to say. It doesn't come from fame. It doesn't come from any of these worldly things. It comes from the pursuit of something greater, enlightenment, as you say. It's something that I think that is more important than ever to pursue right now, especially if the US dollar collapses, which right now the chairman of the Federal Reserve is saying that, look at the writing on the wall. This does not look good. The United States just hit $39 trillion in debt, and this system is only based off of our belief in it. It's only because we believe in this currency that it holds any weight, and people die trying to accomplish and trying to achieve this wealth, this money that literally means nothing besides the stock that we place into it with our own minds. And so being in control of your own mind is the most valuable thing we can do
Yes.
in terms of resistance and revolution. As long as you maintain true independence and you don't rely upon the state, especially when AI is replacing so much of that authority figure, they want to control what's in here. That this is what makes you who you are. That's your soul. So more than ever, that is important. Do you think your audience is predominantly young people? Because you always reiterate how important it is. Obviously, your classes, you teach a high school, but do you think that your influence is with the future?
So I've looked at some a analytics, and well, first of all, my audience is heavily skewed towards male, so about 90% male, 10% female. The other thing is that the demographic tends to be middle age, so maybe from like 35 to 45. And the and most are in the Anglosphere, right? So the United States, and Europe, Canada. And I think a lot of it is these are people who received an education and they were not happy with their education. And they've had some life experience and they're confused by how the world works. And so when they watch my videos, it's almost like a confirmation or validation of their doubt in the world. But I think you need a certain knowledge set. I think you need a certain experience in order to appreciate my teachings. So I'll give an example where, like it's possible, like for one video, I have 2 million views. Okay, so there are 2 million people watching my videos. In my class, my high school class, there are 2 students, guys. Okay, like there are no students. So yeah, there are 2 students in my class because they're too young. They're like 18. They don't know anything. And they're happy-go-lucky. So most students find my class very depressing. But I feel as though that's what education is. Education is about self-annihilation in order to form a proper, more free understanding of how the world works. Basically destroy your brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.